Think you know how brutal ancient warfare could be? You've heard of Rome's glory, its legions, its emperors. But what about the people who stood in their way? What about Carthage, the city that made Rome tremble and paid the price so horribly that the world still struggles to grasp what really happened there? Let's start where most people do. Hannibal crossing the Alps. It sounds dramatic, and it was. But that's only the beginning of Carthage's tragedy. You see, Carthage was not just a city. It was an empire built on trade, seafaring, and a stubborn spirit that refused to bow to Rome's demands. For decades, they fought back. They had no choice. Rome wasn't satisfied with victory. It wanted annihilation. Carthage was a jewel on the North African coast. Merchants from all over the Mediterranean filled its harbors with spices, gold, ivory, and ideas. Its people were famously skilled sailors and traders. Their navy ruled the western seas before Rome even knew how to build a decent warship. But the Punic Wars changed everything. The First Punic War left Carthage bruised but alive. The Second Punic War, with Hannibal's legendary campaign, nearly brought Rome to its knees. Imagine a city so bold that it sent an army over snow-capped mountains, elephants included, just to strike fear into Roman hearts. And it worked, until it didn't. Hannibal's brilliance was eventually outmatched by Roman stubbornness and superior numbers. The defeat at Zama sealed Carthage's fate, but it didn't end their story, not yet. After the Second Punic War, Carthage was forced to pay Rome crippling reparations. They had to hand over their fleet, their elephants, and any hope of expansion. But they didn't die. They adapted. Within decades, Carthage was flourishing again. Its fields were fertile, its merchants busy, its people proud. And that, in Rome's eyes, was the problem. Rome couldn't stand a rival rising from the ashes. Enter Cato the Elder, the Roman senator who ended every speech with the same chilling words. Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. This wasn't about defense anymore. It was about erasing a civilization. So Rome found a pretext. The Numidians, a nearby tribe allied with Rome, poked and prodded at Carthaginian lands. Carthage, forbidden by treaty to wage war without Roman permission, was stuck. If they fought back, they broke the treaty. If they didn't, they'd be picked apart piece by piece. Eventually, they struck back. Rome pounced. The Third Punic War had begun. Not a war of soldiers fighting soldiers, but a siege designed to squeeze the life out of a city. Picture it. A walled city of more than 700,000 people, ringed by Roman camps, cut off from food and fresh water. Carthage sat on a peninsula, surrounded by its mighty walls and the sea that had always been its lifeline. The Romans made sure no ship slipped through. Every day, men, women, and children watched their rations dwindle, hoping for some miracle that never came. If you think ancient sieges were quick, think again. The siege of Carthage dragged on for 3 brutal years. Inside, the people did what they could. They melted down golden statues to buy food. They fought street by street, house by house. Some families resorted to eating shoe leather, animal hides, anything that could fill an empty stomach. Disease crept in, preying on the weak. Rats scurried through empty granaries, feasting on the scraps the people so desperately needed. The smell of rot mixed with the salt air of the Mediterranean, an invisible reminder that death was always near. But Carthage didn't just wait to die. They rebuilt old ships in secret, launching desperate raids to break the blockade. They set Roman siege engines ablaze in midnight attacks. They even constructed a new harbor entrance under the Romans' noses, letting their ships slip out to fight again. These were people who refused to surrender. Imagine the families who hid their sons in fishing boats at night, hoping they'd sneak past the Roman lines to find food or allies. Imagine the fathers who never returned. It drove the Romans mad. To them, Carthage was a wound that refused to close, a people who simply didn't know when to give up. So the Romans tightened the noose. They starved them out. By the final assault, Carthage was a ghost city filled with hollow-eyed citizens, ready to die rather than kneel. And when the Romans broke through, they showed no mercy. They didn't come to conquer, they came to erase. Imagine Roman soldiers pouring into narrow streets, setting fire to homes, temples, marketplaces. Families fled into basements and hidden chambers, only to suffocate in the smoke. Anyone who resisted was cut down. Those who surrendered were chained. Some accounts say the flames rose so high they turned the night sky red for miles around. They say the last defenders took refuge in the Byrsa, the fortress at the heart of Carthage. Thousands of men, women, and children barricaded themselves inside, determined to make a final stand. The Romans torched it. Flames consumed stone and flesh alike. Screams echoed through the city as entire families were burned alive, unwilling to see their children dragged away as slaves. It's said that mothers threw themselves into the fire with their infants rather than let Roman hands claim them. When the smoke finally cleared, the survivors were rounded up. Some 50,000 men, women, and children, out of hundreds of thousands, were chained and marched away to be sold as slaves. The city's walls were torn down. Its harbor was filled in. Its fields were cursed. Legend says the Romans sowed salt into the soil so nothing would ever grow there again. That part is likely an exaggeration, but the destruction was real. Carthage was leveled until it was nothing more than scattered ruins baking under the North African sun. But the horror didn't end with stones and fire. It lived on in the minds of those who survived. Imagine being a Carthaginian mother, forced to watch her children sold to foreign masters, scattered across a vast empire. Imagine a father seeing his sons marched away in chains, never to return. Imagine entire families, once wealthy and proud, reduced to nameless slaves, erased from history except for the story their conquerors told. And what did Rome gain? Power, certainly. A rival wiped from the map. An example for any other city that dared to challenge the Republic. But they gained something else, too, a stain. The destruction of Carthage wasn't just a military victory. It was a warning. Resist Rome, and your children will carry your chains. Your temples will burn. Your memory will be ground into dust. What most history books gloss over is how Carthage's ashes fertilized the soil for Rome's darkest ambitions. With Carthage gone, Rome turned its legions east and west, Macedonia, Greece, Iberia. No rival seemed too big to crush. Each conquest brought more slaves, more wealth, more power. And yet, the seeds of Rome's own destruction were planted in those same bloody fields. Because Carthage wasn't just a victim, it was a mirror. The same cruelty Rome inflicted abroad, it would later turn inward. Slaves poured into the city, cheap labor that made Roman citizens fat and idle. The Senate grew paranoid of any hint of rebellion. And when Rome's own people rose up, poor farmers forced off their land, soldiers abandoned by the state, they were put down with the same iron fist that crushed Carthage. Some Roman senators later wondered if Carthage's ghost had cursed them. The city they wiped out became a symbol of their own darkest impulses. They feared their enemies, so they created more enemies. They feared rebellion, so they bred rebellion. And in the end, Rome's streets would echo with civil wars, emperors murdered in their palaces, and citizens turned against each other. The same legionnaires who once torched Carthage now slaughtered each other for power. But Carthage's story didn't vanish completely. The Romans rebuilt the city, ironically, on the same scorched earth they had salted. Julius Caesar, and later Augustus, saw its strategic value. They raised a new Roman Carthage from the rubble, one that would flourish under Roman rule. But it wasn't the same. The soul of the old city, its gods, its language, its people, was gone. What rose in its place was Roman in stone and blood. And yet, if you stand on the shores of modern Tunis, where ancient Carthage once thrived, you can still find hints of the lost city. Ruins that whisper of streets that once bustled with merchants and priests. Foundations of temples where sacrifices were made to gods long forgotten by the world that replaced them. Every stone tells the same truth. Carthage was not just beaten, it was made an example so terrifying that we're still piecing it together millennia later. So next time you think of Rome, its marble statues, its grand legions, its mighty emperors, remember the price paid for all that glory. Remember the children starving behind the walls of Carthage, the mothers who clutched their babies as fire devoured their homes, the men who fought until their swords broke in their hands, The fall of Carthage was not a footnote in Rome's rise. It was a lesson in what happens when power fears resistance more than it values humanity. It was a genocide disguised as victory, and the echoes of that day still reverberate through history. In the end, maybe Cato got his wish. Carthago delenda est. Carthage was destroyed, but it was not forgotten, because every ruin, every shattered amphora, every scorched stone left behind is a testament that no empire, no matter how mighty, can erase the truth of what it did to those who dared to stand in its way.